Thank you everyone who's joined us today, and to Gabby and John and the live team for their commitment to this subject. This is something that over the last few years, I'm a music researcher, I'm a market researcher by specialism. I've sort of been doing that for 15 years, but always interested in diverse audiences. And I've been working specifically in music research for around the last 10 years. But all of the stuff for IFPI, UK music, IPO, general consumption habits or industry trends. But for the last 3 or so years, as I've kind of gone more into the inclusion space and started working for myself in that area, spotlighting South Asian music has been a real passion of mine. I work in it in a very hands-on way through a dance company, Bollyco, that I help manage. So I've always been part of that scene, and it has given me a lot personally as well in terms of community identity. And we do some amazing stuff, like I'll show. We've done films with Angelina Jolie, etc. But it's kind of like one of the UK's best kept secrets in many ways. And so I really appreciate the commitment from the industry, particularly this last year, to be like, right, what's going on in this space? Let's not just talk about it, let's now back it and try to create change. So today's session is almost like a if you think of Star Wars or whatever, like a prequel to what we did last year, which was quite focused. I wanted today to really go back and be like, right, if we're going to make change, let's understand this systemically. Let's understand who the British South Asian community are. What's the link between music and identity? Because that is a really, really critical one. And then sort of let's understand music infrastructure. So I hope you enjoyed that and sort of that kind of broader look today. Like Gabby said, let me just go on to the next bit. Like Gabby said, we'll look at kind of where we are, what are the positives, what are the hurdles still there, and how we can work towards these together. Just an overview, like I said, we'll start with looking at who British Asians, South Asians are, look again, deep dive into music and identity, and then we'll look at music infrastructure, and then we'll kind of look at sort of reflections and key takeaways. But yeah, this is my moment to basically pretend to be a professor, but I love this stuff. My day to day is very much data. So whether it's market research data, population, or broader secondary population data. So you may be familiar with this. Census 2021 was a real game changer for particularly us that work in the inclusion space, because we saw a massive proportional rise in the diverse population, now making up about 1 in 5, almost, of like about 20% of the general population. British South Asians, or British Asians, the category is, which make up there was a rise from 4.2 million to 5.5 million, and now making up almost 1 in 10 of the population. Now, not all of that is British Asians, because British South Asians, because we also have wider Asian groups, Chinese, etc., in that, who are big categories here in the UK. But around 5 million or so, roughly speaking, are technically British South Asian, one would kind of estimate. So we see here that British, Pakistani, and Indian groups are particularly fast growing. We can see large rises for Pakistani communities and Indian communities. And we'll look at why, younger age structures as well. But what's also really important to look at is that the British Asian community here, while very united in many ways, there are also certain differences and, fractions as communities mature in a particular area as diasporas or geopolitical reasons. But this year, a stat that really sticks with me from the recent census was that 77,000 people chose to write their ethnicity in as their faith, so Sikh, rather than their country of origin, which shows a desire to perhaps identify with that particular aspect of their identity more so than country of origin. And we know that, for example, Punjabi music is so huge in the UK, but it's also often Punjabi Sikh artists. So it's important to note that there are also niches and segments within that community. And if you're looking at shows and venues, then who is your target audience? Is it all British Asians, or actually is that show more catered to South Indians or Punjabis or whatever it might be? So that's a stat that is really quite striking. Next, the British Asian population, I love this map. ONS maps are really quite cool, but you can see where populations are based. The darker areas show stronger concentrations, larger concentrations. And while the British Asian population, yes, London is a very much a core hub, and they make up around 1 in 5 of Londoners. And it's about a third of the whole British Asian population lives in and around London. We see important hubs across the rest of the country as well. So the Northwest, the Midlands, Yorkshire and the Humber. So these are really important areas, which not all minorities or diverse communities are actually as spread out as British Asians. And if you want to look specifically, actually, it's Pakistanis that are more spread. Indians tend to be more London focused. So again, that's something to be aware of if you're looking at events and trying to reach people. It's important to note that British Asians are a very young demographic, particularly in certain communities, Pakistanis and Bangladeshis in particular, but they have a median age of 29 versus 39 for the general population. Almost 2/3 are under the age of 35, and a quarter are under 18. And they make up a significant proportion of the sort of university age students and stuff. So uni gigs that are like Bollywood heavy are, the freshers or whatever it is, they are hugely subscribed. They're like really thriving. And British Asians are also very, very engaged on social media platforms. So I'll show some more stats later, but they're heavily engaged on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. And we often here in the UK see South Asian trends going viral or being the top, sound and stuff because they are so highly engaged across these platforms. Socioeconomics is always fascinating and difficult in the British Asian community, and it does have real impacts for us in music in terms of people's disposable income. So we see that actually there's a lot of affluence in particular areas, particularly British Indians are doing really well in terms of education and job market outcomes. Women are comparable to men in that space, and we do have a large proportion, so almost 500,000 around within the top socioeconomic groups or high earners. But we do then also see a lot of deprivation. So particularly Pakistanis are most likely to live in deprivation, and around a third of British Pakistanis live in the most deprived areas. So again, whether it's ticket pricing or other stuff, we see it can be quite variable in terms of affordability. And I talked about this last year. Some ticket prices for some shows in the British Asian space are like kind of astronomical, like £500-700 you're looking at for certain shows, which again, it kind of makes it a sort of inconsistent, unsustainable ecosystem. I want to touch quite a lot about identity. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot this last year and be asked to speak about a lot. So I wanted to kind of break this down a little bit. The first thing to say is that there is a general sense among communities, and this is a synthesis of some research from a few years ago, but a general sense among British Asians, particularly younger British Asians who are born here, that they need to change themselves in order to fit in order to succeed in the workplace and also wider society, and concerns around discrimination or lack of opportunities, that's very much present. And we see, and this often gets questioned as we know, but there are similar rates of belonging amongst British Asians to the general population. So saying that they feel they belong here. But that said, things like ethnicity and religion are more important to them than other communities. And that can be the nature of as a diaspora, but also what I'll touch upon here is also kind of the nature of having this South Asian context and lived experience. In terms of what, hold on, sorry guys, I just had a click the wrong button, lost something there. But okay, in terms of what this means for viewing, it's really interesting. So I remember I used to get asked, and people are like, well, their viewing habits are the same, and people are listening to the same music because we don't have that depth of consumer research for British Asians, which I'm hoping someone somewhere commissions. I'm ready if anyone does want to. But yeah, there are differences in consumption habits. So firstly, I'll talk about films and content in a foreign language. And this is Ofcom research shows that ethnic minorities generally are much more likely than, well, more likely than the general population to watch content in a foreign language. And British Asians very much so. So over half, almost 2/3 actually do regularly watch content in a foreign language. We have down here your radar and those sorts of stats, but BBC Asia Network, this is a bit older now, so it might be more, but around 500,000 people listen to BBC Asia Network on a weekly basis. That's 500,000 of about 5 million people. That is a significant amount of people that are engaged with that station. Similarly, around a similar amount are listening to got these the other way around actually. Sorry, the logos are wrong. But a similar amount are watching TV in that. So TV might have an older age structure, but you do have young British Asians very engaged with content, that South Asian content, Netflix, etc. Again, you often see things like Hira Mandi trending or stuff like that. So there is a very big interest. Then social media stats, so I mentioned, so very high usage of YouTube. We know that YouTube has a very expansive music catalog as well for South Asian music. So it's often the go-to here and also in South Asia platform people are looking at. So if you're wanting to know trends in music, YouTube charts have a lot of the really interesting information about music that's trending here. TikTok is huge. Again, these become ways of staying in contact with trends from South Asia, or what's going on there. So people are living almost these double worlds in these double worlds of being online. And Snapchat and Instagram really quite significantly higher than the general population is used amongst British Asians. So social media is then also a really important vehicle to get music out to artists, and we'll see that and comes into play a lot. I do want to touch on this broader context of what's been going on because it's very relevant for quite a few things, the kind of unsettling nature of identity politics in the UK. I personally do not recall a time that I've felt this concerned or like not at home in our country. I've just never really questioned it. And then things have been happening in the last year that I don't think you ever believed would happen. I'm at a point where now I'm thinking, what if they try and someone comes in and just says, oh, anyone born here, you have to go somewhere else as well. It's slightly like uncertain territory, and it's very difficult. But what that does mean is that music and entertainment, as we'll show, becomes even more important because it's where you can feel safe. There are concerns around that too, because concerns that maybe certain shows or things, I'll talk about one example where you feel, what if we're targeted by going to those? So, but yeah, we'll move now on to thinking about this broadly. So what music means for identity. So this quote, I really like. I was sort of there's a lot around this. Obviously, music unites us, and it has no borders, it has no race or color, or limits, and it's just music. And I see that we come together, we dance together, we embrace it. But there's also this sense, because I'm always hoping that South Asian music has its Despacito moment. And then or its K-pop element. But then sometimes I wonder, because it is also culturally quite rich, do people feel like it's okay for them to listen? Do they feel, is there an imposter syndrome? I mentioned even sometimes with, like, for example, Punjabi shows or Punjabi music or South Indian. If you're South Asian, but not from that particular culture, maybe you don't feel like, right, are you allowed to be in that space? So it's important to note, as universal as music is, it is also really personal. And this stat from Luminate, their data on actually Black music and fans, African American Black music fans, are notably more likely than the average listener to say that they feel strongly that music is tied to their cultural identity and
Like literally
community.
just had it and it's
Oh, um, yeah, so that's a really important statistic that we find. That has really always stuck with me. And a lot of my work and I guess academic work years ago has been in this space of music, culture, identity, and for communities that have maybe been marginalized or oppressed, music can become a vehicle. So African American music we know is often in like church and stuff. It's a beautiful experience. I used to get to go when I was studying there. But yeah, so there is that element of music being really core to identity also. And just to give some more context around this from the South Asian space, so my ground was an activist in pre-partitioned India, sort of fighting for the independence of of that region. And I remember her sitting down and explaining to me that actually, by and large, this country of what, 1 billion people, people did get on. And it was the music and it was the films. And, you know, like India's biggest superstar is Shah Rukh Khan, who's Muslim. And like, you know, but then you have these divisions around religion and stuff, but actually that still keeps us all connected. So I've become very obsessed with understanding identity in music and culture, and how the very sad history of South Asia with the partition, but actually what are the things that here in the UK we can kind of go against that grain and show that no, you know what, we are united here. And so that's kind of, I guess, been my life's mission. That said, there is always this looming, I don't know, Grim Reaper type of the past and geopolitical tensions that can emerge. And we saw earlier this year with the kind of conflict or mini war between India and Pakistan, and it became a little bit tense here as well. There is often that. And sadly, that can lead to different tensions in venues or whatever it might be. Again, just being mindful and aware of some of these fractions that sadly can happen, but thankfully you know, still managed to remain kind of together. So this is my friend Harun Rashid. He is a BBC Asian Network presenter, and he spoke really beautifully about this. And you can see from the number of reshares and stuff, it went really viral. His clip about how music and entertainment and the Asian Network is our space to be one. So this is just a little clip, but hopefully gives you some insight.
Harun Rashid, who is the presenter for BBC Asian Network, has been reflecting on how the South Asian community here in the UK have been feeling on his programme and the growing calls for peace and unity. But before we actually speak to him, let's listen to some of what he said that has actually touched audiences right around the world and gone viral.
I know that our shared lived experiences bind us together in a manner that I can't even put into words. I know it's hurtful when you see people, you know, sharing divisive material online. I get it, I see it, and I feel it.
Yeah, so this is quite a long clip if you want to explore it in your own time. But it was really emotional. It was a very, very difficult time for a lot of us and a sad time. But it was actually the arts and music that kind of helped us navigate this. A lot of people navigate this. So just kind of building on that a little bit more, and the identity element of music for South Asians. So I've recently completed a study for Leela, which I'll touch upon a bit more shortly, but it's a South Asian sound check, and it was a piece of research, the first one on South Asian music creators and professionals. I've done a lot of this research for other organizations, UK Music, Black Lives in Music as well, but nothing has been done this sort of deep dive on South Asians. And this stat, I remember like putting this in and putting this into the questionnaire, and I was like, oh, I wonder how high this will be. And for me, this is striking. Like, I don't have any benchmarking data, but 84% of people said they feel proud to represent their South Asian heritage through music. And that, I think, you know, we've had years of the moments where Jay Sean was big, or then now it's all about the stereotypes of the light bulbs or this or that, and our music maybe not being celebrated in the same way or understood in the same way. So it has been a journey, and I feel like now things are starting to change because people are reclaiming it. And what we're seeing is, I write and speak about this a lot, this massive drive towards authenticity. The songs that do well here, the South Asian songs, even like the drill trend here is to take a Bollywood beat and then put like a drill rap or whatever to it, but it's like a Bollywood like sample. And those are the songs that are doing well, that are tapping into nostalgia and authenticity, but also that modern element. But at Bollyco, the dance company I help manage, we have like weekly classes, hundreds of people coming to dance at Pineapple Dance Studios. But we did some special classes for some of these songs that have been really popular from Coke Studios. And this one was a special class. Literally everyone has come in desi wear, whatever, like stylized. And again, it's going viral online and stuff. So these are those spaces where people are expressing that identity. Then also stuff that I'm very passionate about is the medical side of music and health. And so we find that for dementia, a lot of people are sort of prescribing music and dance as a way for people to connect with parts of their identity and sort of that kind of side of things. So there's a really, really interesting connection between mental health and well-being and generational kind of differences in trauma and the role of music. We are now thankfully on this trend to reclaim cultural pride and sort of feel a sense of cultural pride. So like I mentioned, there's been a real shift for me. So I've been dancing since like 2010 with my dance company Bolico. And at first I used to hide it and be like, you know, just disappear off from work on a Tuesday and Thursday, no one would know. And then all of a sudden they were seeing us on TV and this was happening and that was, I was like, right now I can embrace it. Like this film, I was in Polite Society, which was an amazing experience. Here, this was Marvel's The Eternals. The film, not the most popular Marvel film, but I love it. And it had like South Asian hero. And we got to act opposite Angelina Jolie. And now we work with a lot of corporates who are like observing Diwali and other things, and the BBC proms we did, and also like the Queen's Jubilee. So there is an increasing interest in South Asian culture, and you know that I think is giving people the ability to show that pride and embrace that pride that I showed from that stat. Something important for the music industry to be aware of is the rise of South Asian creators and their significance and importance in wider business. These are people who have got a lot of reach, like thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers often in among the diaspora. And this was Diwali season is just always hectic. I was helping with L'Oreal's Diwali and literally had over 100 influencers in the room. And this is a coveted audience. It's sometimes there's always that balance between what is like genuine versus what is like, you know, commercialization. But nonetheless, for a community that's been marginalized and doesn't have the spotlight, this is a huge, huge win and quite exciting for many. And I find it fascinating in music, we don't necessarily have that same focal point on South Asian artists. It could be here that obviously brands are trying to sell via the vehicles that are influencers, but I still feel there's something that music can do better, especially given the prominence and rising focus in other areas. Right, I'm going to segue now a bit into looking at infrastructure and what's gone on in music of late. So one thing, shameless plug here for the UK Music five Keys action plan. I was involved in helping in the development of this, and it's been really amazing because I think especially when you're from, you know, quote unquote marginalized communities, or that's your focus, it can be easy to sit and sort of say, well, who's doing what and nothing is being done. But actually, this was such an amazing experience to help bring this to life. The toolkit, please do go and have a look and play in your own time. But it's about taking the 5 Ps and the diversity focus and turning it into something actionable. So that's been great. And one particular slide or aspect that I really wanted to bring to life was this one around understanding equality, equity, reality. Equality and equity, like there's a lot of like you know, words become a big focus in diversity work, and sometimes that can detract, but there is an important aspect here which I wanted to kind of highlight. So if we look at reality, it's basically just things continuing as they are and they're very imbalanced. Equality is about giving everyone the exact same access, which actually if people have got different abilities or different, are starting from a different starting line, you see that also is unequal. But equity is actually trying to meet people where they are and giving them the support that they need. So understanding that actually some groups have already got a good standard level, base level kind of opportunities, others might need more support. And for the South Asian community, I'd say that very much so, there's an equity element of just not having the infrastructure, not even having, you know, sometimes self-belief in music because it's been made fun of or it's not highlighted. And there's this internalized sense as well of kind of almost internalized discrimination that we're seeing. So there's definitely a need to work a bit more to get it right for South Asian communities, which is again why I'm so, you know, grateful for sessions like this. And again, my apologies. Zoom has just changed. It's how it works. Okay, So one sort of positive momentum piece in this space has been Leela's South Asian Soundcheck. I don't know if anyone came across this. This has very much been, I guess, from in music, one of my most proud projects to have been a part of. It's something that I've always wanted to do, is have the music industry have this data on South Asians, music creators and professionals, and Leela are an organization that Vikram Guri has set up to champion and support South Asians in music. And they thankfully wanted to take a data-driven approach, so asked me to come in and build the survey and run the project. So we see here actually what's really fascinating is there's this entrepreneurial like spirit within South Asians, which is in one way is stereotype, but it is very much present, and we see it there in other communities as well, the way maybe the Black community functions in music. They are thriving in their own right. They don't have support, absolutely, but there's still something is happening and people are making something of it. So we see that actually South Asians, I like this stat, they're very much focused not just on the UK, but the global and international, because here there aren't many opportunities and stuff, but yet they still feel that actually we can reach the people around the globe or in South Asia. The main barrier by far was to progress is a lack of representation in the industry. Like this top barrier by some way that people see as sort of preventing them from being able to progress within the industry. So some more stats around that. So while 2/3 feel there has been improvement, the exact same proportion feel that South Asians are still either poorly represented or not represented at all, which would suggest that yes, while there's been some improvement, we're starting from quite a low base, that there actually feels like there hasn't really been that much change, even though there is starting to be. We also see some perceptions among people that the industry is less supportive of South Asian music, and also that there's limited acceptance of South Asians in genres that are not traditionally associated with their background. Now we have in this, from a systemic point of view, there's a whole heap of challenges here because people are working in a range of different genres. But actually, if they're working in, let's say, like, there's always this divide. Do you go like fully non-South Asian? Do you go South Asian? And people can feel a little bit like that's a quite kind of confusing space. But what we are seeing is that kind of South Asian flavor or twist to it. So whether it's hip hop, it's got a desi beat or something. So it's very quite, people work in a range of different genres, just not, I guess, the typical ones. But that would mean that actually they are hoping one day they'll be on the Mercury Prize or whatever it might be, or in those areas. But that's kind of our challenge, helping people navigate the music industry. And like I said, that even though there are gaps, there's actually, I was struck by this, like over half, so 58% are confident that they can make money through music. And there are a lot of, I guess, barriers or assumptions in that South Asian communities or maybe parents don't always encourage people in music or the arts. Now, that is definitely the case in many ways for a range of different reasons, like not wanting stability for their kids, etc. All of that stuff, but also now I feel that's changing because, like a lot of the influencers I showed you, many of them are like working day jobs, then massive influencers, then they make the switch to be full-time. So there is also that potential in music, but maybe less so because you sort of have to give so much to music. But yeah, I think people are starting to consider those dual careers or being able to balance the arts with also doing other stuff. So I feel like there's a shift. In terms of systemic challenges, so we know this, like Sharice and Black Lives in Music, I know, are doing quite a lot of work in this, investigating kind of inequality in music licensing or venues and opportunities. I know this is emerging, but it's kind of either gigs are not commissioned or they're over-policed, or there are different challenges. Sometimes there are real challenges. I've been in the odd situation, which was not ideal, but it is being mindful. But what happens there is that you end up with these shows just going to the same places. So like Notting Hill Arts Club is a great place that's always been supportive, or the Indigo O2. but you're seeing that we're not really going beyond certain venues. Either people don't have access, links, no one's going to take a chance on them, it's just too expensive. And also inclusive environments is also something important, you know, like, is the area inclusive? If you put on a South Asian gig, there are people at risk potentially. You know, there's a lot to think about here, which is why, again, I'll give some examples shortly about ways of navigating that better. Okay, so it was a really beautiful experience, and I don't want to overlabor the point, but it is obviously a challenging time in the world. There's things going on, protests, riots, etc. And so this going there felt really cathartic. It felt beautiful. There is always a sense of, you know, like, what if something happens here? Are we? But I think I have more faith in the UK than that. But this was just beautiful, given everything that was going on this summer, to get to go and experience this. Another thing in terms of now changes, we see labels are starting to focus more on South Asian music and doing that authentically. So I'm not sure if we know Desi Trill. They're a label here that are kind of associated with the UMG group, and they are focused a lot on domestic artists. They put on a lot of free events. This one they did a few weeks ago in Southall, like this kind of like creating loads of energy around it. They are platforming also South Asian creators more broadly, again, tapping into that wider, powerful ecosystem to uplift music. And then they're doing a lot of work in India and stuff as well. And I'm currently doing a few things with them to hopefully kind of help support South Asian artists here. So it's important to know that there's that momentum building. Shout out to Anna, who I think is on the call. So Anna and Asian Tones, Anna's played a really, really important role in building this live ecosystem, because like we said, there aren't that many local gigs always to go to, or the Melas are there and you get to see the top artists for free or very small amounts of money. We don't have necessarily that culture of going to live events regularly. I know in music in general, that's, you know, something that we're trying to work on, but in the South Asian space, there's demand, there's interest in music, but when it comes to domestic artists, they're lesser known and there just isn't that behavior. So Anna's working really hard to shift and change that, with putting on lots of events and showcases. She's got one in a couple of weeks. And also then platforming artists and telling their stories. And the platform's also for Asian artists broadly, not just South Asian artists. So it's a really big shout out to her for what she's doing in a really genuine, passionate way. Then we've seen again, this was last year, but we've seen again this year, the festival scene is very much starting to embrace South Asian music. Glastonbury again this year had a dedicated stage, this time called Azadi. So we're seeing that it feels like it's more of a permanent feature in these spaces. Next, Bollycombe, my sort of pride and joy in this space is dance. And dance is, you know, Bollycombe's leveraging the sort of popularity, immense popularity of dance in the South Asian community in the UK. Like hundreds of people going to classes. It is becoming such a saturated space. It's incredible. But we see that, but then we don't see the same for like music gigs, so, or awareness of artists. So we do a lot of, you know, doing dance content for new of songs or for artists. We did this one for Smurfs and Desi Trill, or then getting the producer here of this song, which was really popular, come in, or, you know, bringing in British Asian artists. So that's always been something that we've done to kind of join up the audience demand and interest for music with plugging into particularly domestic work here. Another really positive shift this year has been the change in the music chart. So BBC Asian Network have worked with Official Charts Company to now create a new chart. So you've got here the official Asian music chart, which now Symmetry is just like now on top of, which is great. But in large part, it tends to be international songs, or Karan, who is Canada based, but is mostly Bollywood, but not really domestic artists. So what they've done is create the official British Asian music chart, which then enables us to see domestic artists and how they're doing in the top ones. So that's really great knowledge and data for anyone who is interested in programming and understanding who's doing well here. Sorry. Okay. This is then the last. I'm gonna have to go back and do this. I keep losing where you guys are. So this is a shout out to Royal Albert Hall, who actually reached out to us because they've done a really interesting collaboration with their resident artists here in the UK, with also A.R. Rahman, who's a massive South Asian music maestro, like one of the biggest. So again, they are de-risking their, work here in the South Asian space by bringing a massive artist, then also bringing domestic South Asian artists and platforming and exposing maybe A.R. Rahman's audience to new talent and stuff as well. So it's a really nice way to go about it. We also see they've done some great work at the proms, and this year Anushka Shankar's prom I had the chance to go to, which was really awesome. Right, so that's kind of mostly my content. I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview of some of the key things that I wanted to get across, and then I'll open up for questions. I wanted to leave like at least 10 or so minutes. So I guess what I wanted to get across today is that for the South Asian community in the UK, music is more than entertainment. It's a space for pride, healing, expression, connecting with generations and cultures, particularly important now amidst sort of what's going on. It's become a safe space for people. Then we do have a young, very engaged, and it's not just young people that are engaged, but a very engaged population that's very active, in that kind of music space. But they are underserved by live events, and that's as much an issue about, not really South Asians not being so connected with music, diaspora artists here, also availability, etc., systemic challenges. So generally they are underserved. I do feel there's still work to be done to join up, demand with the supply. I think there's still a gap. We could put on shows, but would people necessarily come because of lack of awareness and other stuff? That piece of work we still need to do through collaborations or whatever it might be. But we are making progress through things like, UK Music's work, sessions like this, the Leela survey, and also like Ed Sheeran and those sorts of collaborations, I think are really starting to put a focus on this. And there is that opportunity, like I said, to build more inclusive, joined up future. It's not, like I said again, it's not that simple, but we need to get the right connections, collaborations. Maybe we spoke about this quite a lot last year. Like, could we match up venues with, people who are like producers of shows and kind of give those opportunities? That helps venues as well, and it just brings in this additional demand. So, because there are systemic challenges, and there is this kind of, I guess, historic inequity, we do have to work to fix that rather than just assume that it will just all fix itself once we start to put more shows in. So that is a note of caution that I want to flag as well. That hopefully we'll be able to kind of do that work together. So yeah, I'll open up now for questions. Might leave it on this slide in case anyone's got anything specific related to this, or just a sort of summary of what we've spoken about. Just see if there's anyone.
We've just had one question from Joe from Coventry
Yes.
City Council.
Mm-hmm.
Joe said, with the British Asian population being somewhat decentralised outside of London, how can regions such as the Midlands become hubs for Asian music where we know all the audiences exist?
Yes, that's really great, and a great question. And I know there's been a real focus on that. Like BBC have moved a lot of their Asian content, a lot of their general content, but Asian content to Birmingham and the kind of Midlands area. They've got a show there this weekend, actually. It is important to know, again, pricing and all of that stuff differs quite a bit. So at Bodyco, we've done events and things where you just can't price something the same as you would in London, as we kind of know, but it's sort of different interest, different demand. But I definitely think there is a shift towards that. And because the young population, the student population of British Asians are very much spread across, there's a lot of energy around them. So a lot of these Bollywood, like Freshers Nights tour the whole of the UK. So I think it's maybe mapping out what's already happening there, and maybe where the student population is, and kind of basing stuff around that, because I think the student population is an important really important audience that I think could trickle down into other things. But yeah, happy to discuss that further if it's and put more thought to that. But I think it's becoming more common for gigs to be elsewhere.
Anyone got any
Just
other
jump
questions?
in as well on that,
Yeah.
Gabby, if that's all right. It's brilliant as ever. Thank you. I always like to get a
Excellent.
new word. I've got kiddie grant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got my new word of the day, and I've got my new stat of the day, which is the general population median age is 39, but for South Asian, 29. So,
Yeah.
that should be alerting people to the opportunity, if nothing else. I think in terms of creating the hubs, we're doing a lot of work with Metro Mayors at the moment.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure if there's a music board in the West Midlands, but there is for the Liverpool City region, for Manchester. There's incredible stuff going on up in the Northeast at the moment. And so, I'd be interested to know whether what the West Midlands Combined Authority are doing in terms of what's their music strategy and are there routes to build in there? Because I know in those other city regions there are those opportunities, and London as well, obviously. And you mentioned the work that Charisse is doing, and we're proudly supporting around trying to tackle that inequality in music licensing across London, which we know is probably prevalent in other areas as well. But London is the first place that's really trying to get your arms around this one, or everyone's arms around this one. So I think really useful to hear that stuff. There's definitely things happening in the regions, and the metro mayors are a place to make those contacts. How are things, Sania, in terms of like the grassroots venues, grassroots promoters? You've obviously, we've got some great people on the call. You've got Glastonbury, Royal Albert Hall. You've mentioned them in the presentation. Stadium shows for the first time. So we're seeing those huge moments and those really influential venues and festivals in our sector that are seeing this and celebrating this and taking advantage of the opportunity. How do we try and A, do we need to, and B, if we do need to, how do we foster that same sort of innovation and collaboration as we move into those smaller venues, which after all are also looking for how do they get an audience on a Tuesday night, a Thursday night, the third Friday of the month, etc.
Yeah, and I think that we've seen this where there's a lot of risk in some of the smaller stuff because the audience demand is patchy, where people might put on a gig and it has to get cancelled and they just can't. So I think people are scared to risk that. I think if there's something that can be done with smaller venues where there's less upfront investment, but it could be like, hey, look, we can get a bunch of people, we can then create a culture around this, or maybe every Tuesday night, or you link it to something like a dance night, or just a club night or something with an artist playing. Anna, I know Anna, and if you ever want to jump in, please do, because Anna works a lot in this grassroots space. But I think it's de-risking, because we've had it at Bollico, we've been like, announce shows and be like, this British Asian artist coming, and people are like, who's that? And I was like, well, they're streaming really well, like they're really well known, good art, but no one's coming for them, sadly. So we just have to create. So Bollico, we create an experience. We did this show with Quickstar where it was a dance experience. We brought the dance audience in, and then the music was also there. So yeah, I think things like that, slightly innovative things, but where the costs to barriers to entry are a bit lower, and in time that can become more of a better financial relationship, but to start it might be.
No, it is. It's trying to mitigate some of that risk. Absolutely. And Gabby, we've got one of our other board members, the Association of Independent Promoters, have just launched their diversity database, haven't they, in terms of promoters. So, that could be another route, because promoters eat and drink risk. That's all they do is take risk. So I think, how do you create a scene? How do you create a hub? Well, it's some kindred spirits and a place to gather, isn't it? That's what starts things off. So maybe there's something in that. Maybe we hook you up with the AIP as well and see what could come of that.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think definitely the City of Culture, Borough of Culture events are really cool because then they do platform. But that sounds really
If I
cool.
can jump in a second,
Yes, go
just
for it,
on the
Anna.
grassroots. So I actually went to the Music Venue Trust Grassroots Day, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually very heartening to see that a lot of independent venues, bookers and festivals, they are genuinely included. Sorry, genuinely, oh my gosh, the words escape my
Inclusive.
brain. Um, yeah, like genuinely considering and really want to include like the South Asian and wider Asian communities into their programming. I actually have found a lot of it is they just don't know where to look for these
Yeah,
artists also. So I think I've come out of that quite luckily with a lot of contacts, and I've literally just been to them like, if you need an artist of XYZ genre, come to me and I'll give you like a list of names. And if I don't know that person, I know people in our community who can do those suggestions. Um, so yeah, I think a lot of it is there is genuine interest, but a lot of it is also, yeah, those stats and where to find these artists that fit with their programming as
yeah,
well. Yeah.
definitely.
But yeah, just for a reference for like next year, I've already like emailed a lot of grassroots festivals, so like Liverpool Sound City, Dot to Dot, a few more local ones, and everyone's response have been great so far. They've gone through like my 10, 15 suggestions and then have started looking to get those artists included into their lineup. So I think even that in itself, is a great step forward.
Definitely. I think no, and Alex will come to you. I think it's like basically creating that demand, going, oh, look, this artist is on this festival, and then you start to get audiences interested as well. And then, like Anna said, right now maybe we just have to work closely with the festivals to get that right.
Yeah.
Alex, should we? Oh yeah, Anna. Alex would like to connect with you on email.
Hi.
You want to share your...
Sorry, I was typing out my email and then I thought, oh God, I've got to speak as well at the same time. Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for this. It's been a really brilliant presentation. I've scribbled
Thank you.
down and photographed loads of stats and facts and stuff. So I'm part of the contemporary music team at the South Bank Centre, who I've been there for 2 years. And prior to me even being there, there's been a long history and tradition of putting on South Asian music. We've had the Alchemy Festival that used to run for years and years. And now we have our South Asian Sounds Festival. The reason why today was so interesting for me, because we're just about to get into programming for next year's South Asian Sounds Festival. And I think one of the one of the key things for me programming on the festival next year is there's two things. Like, we really want it to be authentic. Hi everyone. And we really want to make sure that we're connecting with the right audiences. Last year's festival, it was really cool, it was really good, but I did notice that there was a definite lack of artists that reached out to the younger diaspora. And I'm really aware, and your
Yeah.
stats highlighted today, just how young the British South Asian diaspora is. And so I really wanted to make sure that we're putting on artists that connect into that. So Anna, I'd really love to talk to you and anyone else that's got links to artists or promoters that can support with that. I found that we tend to work with a lot of the same promoters, and I think some of all of the artists that we put on are brilliant and we're all really proud of them, but I think sometimes it does tend to feel like we're often promoting a certain sort of, I think sometimes an idea of what we think South Asian culture is, and actually not tapping into what's current. And we're presenting brilliant artists, but they're often like legacy or heritage artists, which is great to bring those big audiences out. And I've seen some beautiful audiences, from family to young people to grandparents, and it is great. But I feel like I don't want to use the word pastiche, but it does feel like we're promoting, you mentioned before, like about stereotypes. We're kind of promoting in one slice of the pie when actually there's so much there to be enjoyed and explored. And so for me, for next year's South Asian Sounds Festival, which is running from the 1st to the 5th of July, across all of our spaces, Royal Festival Hall, Queen Elizabeth Hall, Purcell Room, etc. It would be really good, I think. My ambition is to really tap into that younger music experience. So yeah, any sort of tips on that? Because I think we've developed one type of audience, but it'd be great to now move in another direction or build in another direction.
Well, that's an amazing question, and you're absolutely right. And I think as a market researcher, I am very passionate about hearing from people, because I think even we think we know, but I think if you can speak to those audiences of interest, because like I said, something might be streaming well, but is it getting people through the door? Who is that audience? Like Asian Network have a very big focus on C2DE audiences, so their programming, their music is that, but someone else is, Leica Radio is programming from a totally different audience. So absolutely would love to follow this up, Alex, as well. I'll grab your email and drop you a message also. But yeah, super fascinating question. I'm gonna leave my email here in case anyone does want to grab that before we go. And Gabby, I know we'll be following up. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone. I